Hi there! In this lesson, we will explore the exciting world of Spring Boot microservices and dive into the Managed To-Do List project and get it to work with the MariaDB database. Spring Boot microservices are a lightweight and opinionated framework for building independently deployable services. They provide a streamlined way to develop, deploy, and scale applications using Spring and its ecosystem. A RESTful service is an architectural style that uses HTTP protocols and principles to enable communication between systems. It allows clients to interact with resources on a server using standard HTTP methods like GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE. An entity class in the Managed To-Do List project, such as to-do.java, represents a persistent data object that is mapped to a database table. It typically contains fields and corresponding getters/setters to store and retrieve data. A repository interface, like to-do-repository.java, provides a set of methods to perform CRUD, create, read, update, delete operations on entities. It acts as an abstraction layer between the application and the underlying database, allowing convenient data access. A service class, such as to-do-service.java, contains the business logic and acts as an intermediary between the controller and the repository. It encapsulates complex operations or aggregations and provides a higher-level API for the controller to interact with the data layer. A REST controller class, like To-Do REST controller, is responsible for handling incoming HTTP requests and returning appropriate responses. It combines the functionality of a controller and a RESTful web service, mapping endpoints to methods and deserializing data between the client and the server. Now, let's hand it over to Nico. He's got a Dodecanese accent, but don't worry, he speaks the Queen's English flawlessly. Over to you, Nico.
In the previous lesson, we created our first microservice. Now we want to create a database and configure the microservice to work with the database. The first thing we need to do is to open our blog, have a look for the link below, and that will bring you to this page. Once you've done that, then open this link in another tab, and this will give you the instructions to install MariaDB. I have instructions to enable you to install MariaDB on a Windows machine, as well as instructions to install MariaDB on a Linux machine. So follow the appropriate instructions and get that MariaDB installed on your computer. Now, having done that, we then need to log in as root. We are going to be using the root user. This will simplify things in this project. The first thing we need to do is to create a database to-do list. So let's copy this instruction and let's connect to our database. I've already done that. So you paste your instruction here. However, I've already created this database. After you've run this instruction, then you just run the following instruction. Show databases. Always end your instructions with a semicolon. And here you can see I've created this database. The next thing we want to do is say use. Also end with a semicolon. Having done that, now we can continue with the project. You need to modify the POM file. So double-click the POM file and take everything from dependencies right to the bottom of the file, right up to here. Copy that. To simplify things, just replace everything. Delete. Paste. Now we have all the dependencies we need for this project. Control S to save. We need to edit this file here. Application properties. So open source main resources. Double click on this file. What you need to do now is to copy everything that's in this and replace everything that is there. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a source folder with this path name. So to do that, we go right-click the project and we say New, and we look for source folder. Click that and paste this in there. I've already done that, so it won't allow me to do that, but you will do that and then press finish. Having done that, you will now have this. So what you need to do is grab this, drag it, press your Control key, and then drop it in there. I'm not going to do that. This will copy that into that folder. We need that when we run unit tests. Now that we've done that, we need to create the following packages. So let's grab the first one, go up to and excluding the semicolon. Copy. And to do that, we go here, we click here and we say new package and replace that with what we got. Now I've already created this controllers package. You can see it over here. In your case, you will then say finish. So I'm going to say cancel. And you will do that for all of these. We won't use them all now, but in the next lesson, we are going to do more sophisticated things with this project. After you've created all these packages, the next thing we want to do is we want to create an entity class. This class mirrors the database. You can say that it is a Java representation of a table we want to create in the database. So what I need to do is I need to copy the name and then go into the model package. You see it says here, model package. Right click there and say new class. Paste the name. And now inside this class, we are going to put the code we need. So copy all of this from there right to the bottom. Copy. And what we are going to do is we're going to keep the first line or line 1. We're going to delete the rest of the class and then paste this code in. And save it. After I've done creating all the required classes, I will go through them and explain what we are doing. The first one is this class represents the table in the database and it has all the fields. If you look here, these are the fields of the database. There's a due date, details. There's also a task and there's also a to-do ID. And the name of the table, you see here we're defining the table. The name of the table will be to-do in lowercase. And the class name is to-do in camel case. After that, we need to create the next class. Now, in this case, it's not a class, but an interface. So copy the name of the interface, go into the repositories, right-click, and say new interface. New interface, paste it. And now let's get the code we need for that. Copy. And just replace this part here. Now what this is going to do, the repository is a special interface that we use when we write Spring Boot or Spring applications that will wire our program to the database. And in this case, it's going to connect us to the to-do table. We need to create a repository for every table in the database. Now we want to create a service class. So copy the class name to-do. This is going to sit inside the services package. So here it is. Now we say new class and we paste it. Let's see what code we have. Copy it and replace all of that and save it. The service class is going to call the repository interface, the to-do repository, this one here, this class is going to call this interface, and by doing that, it's going to allow us to connect to the database and run queries. The service class will have methods that can be called to return data. In this lesson, we are only going to be retrieving data from the database. In the next lesson, we are going to do the full CRUD, where we will do insert, update, delete or remove, and also what we have done here as well, in other words, to retrieve. After we've done that, go back here, and now we need to create a helper class. And this is going to be in the helpers package. Right click here, say new class, paste in the name, and now we want to replace the code. Copy. Now, the helper class works like a facade. You have an ugly building and you put a nice facade in front of the building to make the building look attractive. In our case, we have an ugly service class, and we are now going to use the helper to call methods of the server class, which we will then expose to the front end. Why we want to do that is, ideally you want the service class to return exactly what it receives and do no modification to the data. And then in the helper class, we are going to call the service class, get the raw data, and then modify it for our requirement, and then send the modified data to the browser. In this lesson, we are going to use the browser. So that's what a helper class is going to do. It's going to help us use the service class. Right? The next class we need to do is the REST controller. So copy the class name, and this will sit inside the controllers package. So here we are. Right click, new class, paste this in there. And now let's replace the code. And save it. Control S. You may be asking the question, what is the controller and why did I call this a REST controller? Well, our microservice is going to be a RESTful service, and it's going to use what they call the REST interface. We will send JSON requests to it, and it will return us data back in JSON format. And in this case, we are going to have two methods. The one is getActive to-dos, and the other is getAllTo-dos. When I created the to-do entity class, which represents the to-do table, I created these fields. And one of the fields here is status. And I am going to use status to have values busy, to do, and completed. This will allow my REST controller to be able to give me a list of all the to-dos or of all the to-dos that have not been completed. I have two methods in my to-do. The first one is getActive to-dos. This is only going to bring the data from the database of my to-do list where the tasks have not been completed. And the second one is going to bring everything. And these will be wired to this URL, getActive, and this will be wired to this URL. Now that we've done that, it's time to test it. Right-click the project, select Run As, and select Spring Boot App. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to generate the table in the database. So if I go here now, so tables, and I see I now have a table to do. Having got that, we now need to run these queries. I'm not going to run them because I've already done that. After you've run the first query, you then run the second query and the third query. When you've done that, then you run this command. And you should get this back now. If you look here under the status, this one is to do, this one is completed, and this one is busy. Let's go back to the instructions. The next thing we need to do now is to test our API in the browser. What we have just written is a RESTful API. So I'm going to open this link, which is calling the second method. And now I can open this link in a new tab. And this link returns me all the data. It's sorted by task name. So you see item number 3 is a task. This is a good sign. It means that I have retrieved all the data in the database. Next, I want to run the active list also in a new tab. So press the control button and click the link. Or you can right-click the link and say open link in new tab. Now in this case, it's only showing the tasks that are active, in other words, busy and to do. It's not showing the completed tasks. We will now explain what we did. In the first step, we added database and other dependencies to the POM file. Then we needed database credentials. This we added to the application property file. Then we needed to create an entity class. As we said, this class is a Java representation of the to-do table in the database. Then we added the repository interface. The repository was added to allow us to use the JPA technology to talk to the database. We also added a method there, find by to-do ID. Then we added the service class, the to-do service. This is used to call the to-do repository interface to communicate with the database. Next, we added the helper class, the to-do helper class. In this class, we modified the data that we received from the service class. The idea was to keep the service class simple. It must return what it gets. So we do the modification in the helper class. So here what code we wrote was to only take records from the database that were not completed. And then finally, we created our controller class. This class has two methods, getActive to-dos and getAllTo-dos. The getActive to-dos is wired to this URL, getActiveList. So if I go to the browser and I type getActiveList, it only returns me the 2. And then if I go to the browser and call this method, the getAllToDos, it returned me all the records sorted by task alphabetically. And these two web methods that we created now are the first parts of our RESTful API. In the next lesson, we are going to add CRUD. That's create, read, edit, and delete. So we will have web methods in the REST controller to create data, to update data. We've got methods to read data, and then we will also create methods to delete data. I am now going to show you how we use this in the real world. First of all, we need to find out where this project is located. So right-click here and select Properties. This is the location. Just copy this path, cancel, and now open that path in the File Explorer. You will find a target folder and a source folder. We need to go one level above this and then right-click and open this in the terminal. If you are in Windows, you would open the command prompt and you would do a cd and paste that path that you got. So it would be cd and the path you got. And then once we are there, we want to run a Maven command. We want to build this project. So mvn clean package. This runs the unit tests and then builds. We're going to find the target folder. Here it is. And we now need to cd to the target folder. Once you're in this folder, you can do a dir if you're in Windows or a ls-la in Linux. And here's the file, to-do service jar. So what we're going to do now, before we do anything, make sure there's no application running. That's fine. It's been shut down. Now we are going to say java-jar and copy, paste, enter. One of the benefits of using Spring Boot is it comes with its own embedded Tomcat web server. So it's running now in its own embedded web server. So I can now go back with the browser and open these URLs again. So if I do a refresh, you can see it ran here. And it's now displaying that. If I go back to the previous one and say enter, you can see now it's brought me the data. So what has happened now is I've now got my REST service working as a self-standing server and not from the IDE. And I'm able to communicate to it using the URL that we defined in the REST controller. And with that, thank you. I hand you back to Josh.
In this lesson, we learned about RESTful services. We configured our Spring Boot application to connect to MariaDB, then learned about the entity class todo.java that represents a persistent data object that is mapped to a database table. We learned about the repository interface todo repository.java, which provides a set of methods to perform CRUD on a database table. Then we learned about the service class todo service.java, which calls the repository interface to be able to perform CRUD in the database. Finally, we learned about the REST controller class, which is responsible for handling incoming HTTP requests and returning appropriate responses. Thank you for joining us in this lesson, where we explored the integration of our Spring Boot microservice with MariaDB. We would like to extend our gratitude to all those who have watched this video and followed along with the tutorial. To ensure you don't miss out on this valuable lesson, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. By subscribing, you will stay updated with our latest content and receive notifications whenever we publish new tutorials and insights. If you found this lesson helpful and insightful, I kindly request you to consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. By subscribing, you will stay updated with our latest content and receive notifications whenever we publish new tutorials and insights. Your feedback is essential to us, so please take a moment to leave a comment on the video, sharing your thoughts about this lesson. We value your opinion and would love to hear what you found most valuable and what you would like to see in future lessons. Lastly, if you enjoy our content and would like to support us further, we invite you to become a patron of our channel. Your support will enable us to continue creating quality tutorials and deliver valuable knowledge to the community. In our next exciting lesson, we will take this project to the next level by implementing full CRUD functionality in our Spring Boot microservice. We will dive into creating, reading, updating, and deleting records in the Managed To-Do List application. It will be an engaging journey as we explore the power and flexibility of Spring Boot in handling data operations. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click on the notification bell to be notified of the next part of this lesson. Once again, Thank you for joining us in this lesson, and we look forward to your continued support.